and welcome to A Slightly Twisted Female. I'm your host, Brittany Rue. I've just been really preoccupied mentally and emotionally, spiritually, every which way with this whole Roe versus Wade thing. And I also do want to talk about the implications of what this leak means to our faith in the Supreme Court and emotionally, spiritually, that issue as a what I mean, just as a political move, that's an issue. But first and foremost, and we can do that another time, but first and foremost, I want to talk about the implications of this decision. As a person who, again, and my stance is, and I want to reiterate, I believe that abortion is always a tragedy, and I would fight for my daughters and the young women and girls of this nation and of the world to be able to access safe and legal abortion for virtually any reason whatsoever. And so I want to really try to look at both sides of this argument. And on Tuesday, May 10th at 1 p.m., I'm going to be hosting a call-in. I'm going to be hosting a call-in event where hopefully people can give their opinions and thoughts on this issue. And I want people from all sides of the aisle on this issue. I want to hear from everybody. I want to hear from women. I want to hear from men. I want to hear from pro-life. I want to hear from pro-choice. I want to hear from pro-regulation people. And I want to hear from lesbian women. I want to hear from straight women. I want to hear from bisexual women. I want to hear from mothers. I want to hear from child-free women. I want to hear from young women. I want to hear from older women. So hopefully we can get a really good range of perspectives going. It's going to be really similar to what I hosted for the GenSpect event. And I want to really get into the nuance of this conversation. I'm getting really tired of all the sort of political sound bites, and this is an issue that impacts the lives of so many women, of children, of families, and I hate how it's being hijacked by politicians to promote their own agenda, their own political aspirations. There's just so many important things to be discussed, and this cannot be reduced to a soundbite. Cannot be reduced to some political slogans. So I really want to get into the nuance. Hey guys, Al said if they outright ban it, they'll be back to street doctors doing it, and that's exactly what I want to talk about today, actually. So I'm going to put the live chat up. I want to talk about where I trained during my midwifery apprenticeship was in a place called Taytay Rizal, which is about in the Philippines. It's about 40 minutes outside of Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines. And for those who don't know, the Philippines is an island nation off the coast of China. It's in the Pacific Ocean. It's it's like right below Japan. It was formerly a Spanish colony, then it became an American colony, and it's currently sovereign. It's had a lot of issues. It's right now experiencing a population explosion, and it is a predominantly Catholic country. Mindanao, which is in the south, so it's made up of, I'm not sure how many islands. It's almost like 300 or something like that, like a shitload of islands. And there's 3 major islands. There's northern Luzon, which is the northernmost. Then the centralmost island is where Manila is. And then the south you have Mindanao. And Mindanao is, it's almost like its own nation. It's Islamic. It's predominantly Muslim. And there's a lot of issues actually with terrorism down there. So when I was in the Philippines, we were strongly encouraged not to go to Mindanao, but the rest of the country, I think some upwards of like 85% of the country is like devout Catholic. And there is no separation of church and state in the Philippines. And so a lot of Catholic law, papal law, is codified into the legal system of the Philippines. And as you can imagine, that includes abortion. While I was working at Shifra Banay Panakan, again, which is in Taytay Rizal, we were served, it was a high volume birth center. It was set up by American missionaries, a family, but it was like really matriarchal. I really liked it, even though it was Christian missionaries, which again, like I said, is kind of like its own thing. This was such an awesome, down-to-earth family. The woman, Jerry, is like 75, and she's accomplished so much in her life. She lived in Afghanistan. I mean, she's dedicated her life on the ground to helping women, helping children, but really women. She's worked with midwives. She's set up birth centers. She's given women options, and especially in a country like the Philippines, where on the one hand, you have zero access to safe and legal abortion, and you have like mandatory continuing of pregnancy, yet they barely have the resources for for maternity care. They don't have Medicaid the way that we do. And one of the scary things is that, we were a very low tech birth center. We worked using very low tech holistic measures. We used handheld Dopplers. We had to work with our hands a lot. There's times when I had to literally reach up into a uterus and help rotate the baby who was maybe flexed in a weird way. Whenever we would have a bleed, for example, or a postpartum hemorrhage, we do bimanual compression, where you put your hand on top of the fundus externally and you go up to the cervix internally, and you're literally physically contracting the uterus back down. Because again, when the placenta detaches from the uterine wall, you got to understand a placenta is like this big, right? Placenta, if anyone's seen a placenta, it's huge. It is the one shared organ that is shared between the mother and the baby. And that's the thing that filters everything, all of the blood, all of the nutrients, all of the oxygen source from the mother to the baby. And when that detaches, the uterus is already contracting to push the baby down. Every contraction, that's basically the fundus is pushing the baby down. It's contracting down. And what sometimes happens is that after the baby is born, after the placenta is detached from the uterine wall, you got to understand the size of the placenta is the size of the womb on the uterus. If the uterus is not properly contracting back down, you have an open wound, and that mother is going to continue to bleed, because you have to understand the uterus literally embeds itself into the uterine lining and taps into the mother's blood source. So there is an active blood source that was just prior flowing between the mother and the baby via this placenta. And so if it detaches, you can't get that to contract back. The mother's going to bleed out. Okay, so we have few low-tech options, which is either to bimanual compression to force the uterus to close down, and we give an injection of an intramuscular injection of Pitocin. So I say all that to say is that we use every resource available to us, and a lot of these are not material resources. These are intellectual resources. These are just knowledge of birth practices, low-tech birth practices, because the fact of the matter is, yes, we can transfer a mother, but the women that we were serving were living in abject poverty. And there aren't things like health insurance and stuff like that. If you can't pay, one of two things is going to happen. They either will leave you at the doors, you won't get in through the hospital, and technically that's illegal. So they legally are supposed to admit you. That doesn't mean that always happens. Or they will admit you. And another way that they coerce families into paying if they can't pay is that they'll discharge you after 48 hours, discharge the mother and discharge the family, but they'll keep the baby. And you get to come in twice to feed the baby and pamper the baby, to change the baby's diaper and care for them. You got to understand, babies need to be fed every 2 hours. Babies are need to be fed around the clock. And it is so dangerous. A baby can quickly become dehydrated if they're not getting nutrition and fluids every 2 hours. You come in twice a day, that baby will be dead in a few days. And the hospital staff doesn't care. The hospital staff, they put the babies all in a room who the parents are indigent, and they can come in twice a day, and until they can feed the baby, they're not discharging the baby. A lot of babies die. And additionally, next to the birth center that I was working at, again, it was a high volume birth center. Every Friday we hosted big group childbirth education classes, and there were like incentives. Basically, if women attended the full curriculum of birth classes, I think there were like 8 of them or something like that over a 2-month period, and came every week, and they got a certificate. The birth, we would like basically cover the whole birth. They would have to pay for almost nothing. And we also offered a lot of clinics for IUD insertion, and we inserted the copper plated IUD, which on label says it has a life of 10 years, but there's a lot of evidence that it can work up to 15 years. So, and these are non-hormonal, they're very cheap, they're very accessible, they're very easy to put in, and it saves lives. Because again, I've seen the horrors of what birth can do to women. I don't know. So I had posted yesterday, a little video called Mama Toto, and it was like in honor of Mother's Day. I actually made it before this whole Roe vs. Wade thing hit, and I was like, and then after that hit, I was like, is this like in bad taste to post? But the fact of the matter is, it's like we can celebrate motherhood by recognizing that motherhood is a massively huge decision for women. It changes women's lives. I've spent my life supporting mothers. I've spent my life supporting women, pregnant women. I love babies. I love children. I love seeing families grow. But I know what a massive undertaking that is. I know the risk that mothers take on. It is not a simple thing, and it's not, it's a huge mentally, emotionally, medically, for women who are, and unfortunately a lot of women with unplanned pregnancies are women with chemical imbalances, women with psychiatric issues. They're not taking care of themselves to begin with. They're putting themselves in high risk sexual situations. They're the ones who are getting pregnant. Do you understand what a postpartum psychiatric episode can do to a woman and a family? And I talked about the Andrea Yates situation in my last live stream, which was a mother who had been impregnated over and over again, every other year by her husband, wound up with 5 kids, and then drowned them all, was psychotic, and there were signs that she was psychotic. Hey Mesh, how do I, damn it, hold on, sorry, there's like a Mech, can I make you, just for while you're in here and I trust you, can I make you a mod, and can you just clean up any of these stupid like trolls and stuff that are in here? Oops. Mech, do you mind if I make you a mod? I'm making you a mod. You have no choice. Sorry. I trust you. Just get rid of all these like stupid people. And if you can't stay the whole time, obviously that's totally fine. Here we go. Let's see. Okay. All right. So, and I want to talk about the Philippines because I want to talk about what I saw in the Philippines. So, when we talk about pregnant women, we talk about parity. and gravidum. So gravidum is how many times a woman's been pregnant. So let's just say that a woman had been pregnant 5 times and she had lost one baby to miscarriage and she had lost one baby to an abortion, right? So that would be, so, and then you parity is how many live births she's had, okay? So she would be 5 gravidum and 3 paris, right? Like a triparis woman. So when we talk about multiparous women, that's women who have given birth to multiple children. When we have nulliparous women, that's women who have given birth to no children. When we talk about primiparous women, that's a woman who's given birth to one child or is giving birth to her first child. When we talk about, there's a term called grand multiparity. Grand multiparity is defined as any woman who has given birth to over 6 live babies. And or 6 babies, period. I mean, technically, even a stillbirth is a parity. So, let's see. There was a woman while I was there there were 2 births that really stood out to me. One of them was a grand multiparous woman who I believe was like 41. I'm 34. This woman was like 6 or 7 years older than me. She was on her 13th baby. She had basically been pregnant her entire adult life. I mean, not even her, starting in her teenage years. And her husband died during this pregnancy. And they were living in abject poverty. She had other babies. And while she was giving birth, so she had decided that she was going to surrender the baby next door because we had the birth center. And right next door, we had the Little Children's Center, which was a orphanage, because a lot of the women that we cared for, giving babies up to orphanages is very common in the Philippines. Because again, abortion is outlawed across the board in any situation whatsoever, including rape, including incest. So a rapist knows that he can force his victim to carry his child. If anything, that incentivizes abusive men to rape and impregnate. That is the ultimate exercise of control over a woman, is to force that woman to carry a baby for you. And knowing that the government is going to support that rapist's right to have his progeny carried on. And you also have to understand and recognize too that one of the greatest motivators of male behavior instinctually and evolutionarily is to reproduce, is the fact that women bear the reproductive burden. Women basically get to choose which men will continue their bloodline. And men are like innately installed, hardwired to be anxious about reproduction. That's why they're always looking for sex. They're looking to have as much sex as possible to ensure that at least some of that will lead to a conception, right? Whether it's conscious or not. And what's so egregious about rape is that it strips women, because women bear so much burden in carrying children and raising children and breastfeeding babies, and such a huge emotional, laborious, physical sacrifice for the baby. Women are given the choice about which men will have the opportunity to reproduce. And for a normal, healthy, adjusted man, this is a positive motivator. He will look at, well, what do women need? What can I do to earn the right to have a woman to carry a child for me? He will invest his time in building himself up financially, educationally, creating sort of a nest, a place that he can welcome a woman and basically influence, like make her want to have a child with her, right? Or a child with him. And that's what a normal, healthy, good man would do, is evolve himself, is to motivate himself to be the best he can be to attract a woman who then will deem him a worthy mate. What's so sinister about rape is that it's like a shortcut. It's just a smashing through all of that. I don't give a fuck whether or not you choose me. You're going to carry my child. It's men who are so anxious, who know that they don't have whatever it is. It was really born from just like a deep, deep inner insecurity. And it is about control. It's about whether you want to or not, you're going to carry my child. I'm not waiting for you to decide. I'm not going to sit here and do all of the tricks, bend over backwards, and you're going to carry my child. And that is horrific, and it is sinister. It's terrifying. And when we have a government that stands beside that and says, yes, you have no choice. Fuck whatever your plans were. Fuck your other children. Fuck your life, your health, your well-being. Even in situations where the mother's life is at risk, she is forced to carry a child to term. Even if it's her rapist's, even if it's her father's. So, when I talk about abortion is always a tragedy, it is, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't give my life to protect women's right to access it at all costs, right? And have full sovereignty. Because if a woman, I always hear men complaining about, women are always favored in custody courts, and that's not fair. Yes. And that's okay. I don't care. Because when women across the board have to sacrifice so much more of themselves over a lifetime for children, yes, they do get more say. Yes, all the men crying, well, I didn't get a choice in whether or not she aborted my baby. She just went and did it. Yes. There are natural inequalities in this world. Women bear the reproductive burden. We will always be the ones to give birth. We don't get to negotiate that. We don't get to decide who it is. It's us. So yes, we get more autonomy. We get more say. It doesn't. Trying to close that gap and, well, let's give men more of a say and let's make it 50-50 and let's make it even, or let's make it so that men have to sign off on an abortion. That's not equalizing. It's like the trans movement. We have to acknowledge that there are natural inequities and we need to respond accordingly. All right, so before I play this, let's see. Meg says, clues the pro-infanticide crowd is nuts. If it's a healthy baby, then people will take it in an adoption. There's always a shortage of newborns. People don't want older kids. They want babies. And that's the thing, Meg, and that's the whole infanticide thing, I think, is just to like really get people worked up. Someone was talking about saying, it should be up to 40 weeks because of, I don't know if anyone knows, like the Jackson Strong. It was a child, this little boy who was born with anencephaly, and the family knew about it. At 20 weeks, the baby's structures are developed enough, for the most part, to be able to determine whether or not there's some chromosomal abnormality or major structural defect, right? So there was a family, it was the Buells. It was Brittany and Brandon Buell. This is a few years ago. They had a child named Jackson, and at the 20-week anatomy scan, it was determined that he had something called anencephaly, which means that he was only developed a brainstem. Brainstem is responsible for all of our most base level functions, such as breathing, our heart beating, just sort of like reflex type stuff, right? So when he was born, he was this normal, beautiful baby. He really was this gorgeous little baby, and it was heartbreaking. But they really turned on the whole grifter scene. So it was they were like, we're gonna keep this baby, and I'm sure probably started off as it was a wanted baby. It was their first baby. They were newlyweds, and they were involved in the church, and I also think the whole church thing was just to kind of pander to Christians. I think they acted that they were more Christian than they were, whatever. So they got they're we're going to carry this baby to term, and that's fine, right? And the thing was, they ended up utilizing, I mean, the most advanced level medical care to keep this child alive. And for all intents and purposes, there's nothing to say that this child was sentient. And in fact, the majority of doctors were telling them that he wasn't, and they still insisted on using any and all advanced medical technology to keep the child alive. Fine. So for the next 2 years, this child who is having regular seizures, and he would make like spontaneous facial expressions, and they were like plastering everything all over the Facebook, and they were like, look, it's a miracle. See, we were told that he would have no quality of life, but look, Jackson smiled, and he's saying I love you. He was making like random noises, and was having seizures, and they were like basically trying to like frame it as something that it wasn't, despite the fact that there were so many doctors trying to compassionately let them know that these are not intentional functions, or not, and this child was paraded around, was on USA Today. They took him to all, flew him out to all these different studios and did interviews and had him on, can you even imagine the bright lights and the boom and people in his face? This poor medically fragile child who in any other time and place would have already passed away, was just being paraded around. And they ended up like setting up a GoFundMe, and I think they made like some like $250,000 and like bought a new house and quit their jobs and went on vacations. It was just crazy. It was like, I like watched this thing go down in real time, and they like shut down anybody who criticized it. And it was like, so the point is, this baby was clearly suffering, right? And we saw it happening. And a lot of times women, so the whole idea of like, keeping abortion legal to 40 weeks is so that like people can abort critically ill children. And my response to that is this. So up until viability is really like said to be about 24 weeks. Viability is determined as what age have we ever been able to have a child survive. And it's around 23, 24 weeks. Now, what you need to understand, 23, 24 weeks, that's like a 4-month baby, right? That's like, it's just barely, oh no, I'm sorry. It's like a 6-month baby, right? So 20 weeks. So 20 weeks is when all of like the major structures are visible enough that you can see, the baby's genitals. That's usually when the gender or the sex determination happens. Like, oh, it's a boy, it's a girl, and people have their, gender reveal parties. And then about 23 to 24 weeks is when we have been able to have babies live outside the womb. Now, mind you, this isn't naturally. This isn't babies who are just able to survive on their own. This is with intense medical technology. Okay, these are women, or these are babies who are, sent immediately to a level 3 NICU, a neonatal intensive care unit, and given around the clock care for months. And a lot of these children will end up having lifelong problems. A lot of very, very early premature babies, very severely premature babies, will never be independent. Will have, just mental retardation. I know that's like, retardation literally, to retard literally just means slow. We'll have, so like a retarded development just means like a slow development, like a not full development. We'll have, so it's like, even that is whatever. But I do think that, okay, fine, keep to viability, because the fact of the matter is the vast majority of genetic testing, like if you're predisposed to some sort of genetic anomaly, you should have genetic testing. And then at 20 weeks, any of the visible structures. Now, does it catch everything? Absolutely not. With that being said, it would be so cruel. So the reason why a lot of people are like, oh, there's no reason to keep abortion, 16 weeks is enough. And I say that, yeah, too. But I also feel like up until viability is acceptable in cases where the baby has either an incompatible with life diagnosis, or a diagnosis that is so severe that the quality of life would just be horrific for the baby. We saw that with Jackson. It was horrible what this child was subjected to and put through. Most women aren't choosing to abort their baby at 24 weeks just because they took that long to decide. Doesn't happen, I'm sure, but we need to keep these options open, because think about how heinous and cruel it is to make a mother go through a full 40-week, full-term, pregnancy and labor and give birth to a baby that's going to die in an hour. It's suffering for the child, it's suffering for the mother, and pregnancy is not a small thing. The amount of changes that happens to your body is really, really intense. So, let's see, Lisa Fenwick, third trimester abortions for non-medical reasons are not even really a thing. Yeah, exactly. They're not. And they're not a thing, because it really is. Listen, it's murder. I was trying to explain to this. The way that they do the later second trimester abortions is to induce birth. And the baby usually can't survive without the womb and will pass very quickly. But if you induce labor and if you try to have an abortion that way in third trimester, the baby will survive. The baby will survive. You at 30 weeks. So you would need a backup plan. So technically, to make an abortion and not infanticide, the baby would have to be killed. Would have to be killed while still in the womb. So there's a danger then even having to go up into the mother and surgically, whether they used to do it where they would snip the baby's spinal cord. They had another method that was what's it called? Saline poisoning. So they would basically shoot saline up into the baby in a really, really condensed form of saline, and it would cause all this burning and stuff, and that was one of the methods that a lot of babies survived, because it would kill some of them, but some of them would actually be born with these horrific burns all over their bodies, totally disfigured. And then there's ones where they would go up and try to snip the baby and they would get the wrong, so babies would be born without an arm and stuff. This stuff does happen. So the later trimester abortions, women need to have enough counseling and stuff to make a decision early. And another problem is how many women don't realize that they're pregnant, and that just attests to how out of touch women are with their bodies. I mean, that's so insane to me. I literally can feel it. I can feel from almost the moment of conception. I can feel when I ovulate. If you pay attention to your body, and if there's, without even any trackers or anything like that, there is a way to assess where you are in your cycle just by reaching up and feeling your own cervix. Sometimes it's hard to get a good angle. Especially if you're taller, or if you're overweight, or if you're just not flexible. But if you feel your cervix, if you feel how ripe it is, and if you can feel in your mucus, your discharge. Women have natural discharge, and that's another thing. People think that all discharge has to do with a yeast infection or a STD, which is no at all. Our vaginas and our uteruses are very naturally cleaning, and there's a lot of discharges and stuff. And one of the discharges from the cervix is there's fertile discharge, right? So when it's that kind of egg yolky, I'll do this. I'll explain how to monitor all this sort of stuff, because women are going to need to start learning this stuff too. This is what's going to protect you from unwanted pregnancies. This is what's going to keep you in tune with your body so that you know what's going on. You can feel if you're pregnant. If you reach up and you know what a pregnant cervix feels like, you can feel that, because you can literally grab hold of your own uterus and feel that it's expanding, and what happens is a plug starts to form in the cervix that will seal it off once you're pregnant. So women just need to get back in touch with their bodies across the board. But let's get back on to I have 45 minutes before I have to go, so I'm going to try to stay on track. I have a Mother's Day thing to go to with my kids, which is cute, but it's their school. They are doing a little, it's a Mother's Day tea party, and the kids are going to sing a song and give us their little crappy handmade arts and crafts present. I live for them. It's so cute. So, but I'll try to stay on track. Let's see. Indigo Child, this is triggering probably for women who have had traumatic births and pregnancies. Also talking about killing the babies, it's upsetting, honestly. Yeah, no, it is upsetting, it is upsetting. And it's just, the thing is, What's more upsetting though? Is it more upsetting to talk about it, or is it more upsetting that it's happening and people don't know about it and people aren't talking about it? We need to talk about these things. Talking about them doesn't make them cease to exist. Talking about it, understanding the history of abortion, because both are horrific, and I want to go through both. Right now, I want to talk about how abortion bans are horrific, but we can also talk about how the abortion industrial complex is horrific in its own right, right? We need to understand the full range. We've got to get out of our echo chambers. We've got to get out of our la 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 la, and realize that there are anti-woman facets on each side. The abortion industrial complex is not pro-woman, okay? The anti-hardcore, anti-abortion industrial complex, these carry the baby at any cost for any reason, it is incredibly bad for women, bad for children. We need to understand both sides of the spectrum, okay? We need to have a full, more complete, so that we can move to a society that both values life, not only of the baby, but of the mother. We need to keep a value of life. Once we lose value for life, once we become like an antinatalist society, or wish we become like a misanthropist society, we don't value human life on both ends, the mother's life or the baby's life, we're in bad shape. Bad things start to happen, okay? So when we're prioritizing the baby over the mother, that's really dangerous. When we're treating babies as if they're just this totally disposable thing, and sex should be totally recreational, and fuck what happens, that harms women too. And I talked about that in my last live stream. We can keep talking about that. F you, lady, you don't know what I've been through, and I don't watch pro-abortion stuff. It's sad. Bye. Okay. You're welcome to leave. Jammy Cake Chaos. Obama was a liar. Before him, DC used local funds to help poor women pay for abortions, and he let Congress nix that as part of a budget deal. Of course, women are always the first to get cut. Women are always the first to get cut. Crumbly Duckling. I had no sex education. And again, Indigo Child. If you think that I'm saying that late term abortions are a good thing, or it's a good thing that we were poisoning babies and wrecking mothers' uteruses with saline solution, you're out of your mind. Again, sometimes you guys, we need to this is an emotional topic, but sometimes we need to put on our big girl panties and have hard conversations and try to detach from the more emotional aspects. There is a time and a place for emotional aspects. If we never treat anything as human emotion as being relevant, that's also dangerous, right? But sometimes we need to separate from that, look objectively at what is going on, and analyze it. Crumbly Duckling said, I had no sex education. It would have been handy for me to know all this back in the 1970s. And that's exactly the thing. The sort of sex education that we need right now is this. We need to talk about girls should go be meeting with midwives, and I actually want to reconnect with some of the local midwives in my area and talk about offering this sort of holistic sex education to kids. Even some of the Waldorf schools in this area, I bet would be very amenable to it. But let midwives teach girls how to read their cervical mucus. That's helpful. How to monitor their own fertility without needing anything. That's helpful. How to monitor their cervixes. That's helpful. What's not helpful is the genderbread man. What's not helpful is talking in circles to little kids about gender identity versus gender expression versus sexuality versus, being fluid. That doesn't help children at all. It's making it more confusing, more insane. We're leading kids to just even further disconnect from their own bodies. Oh, you want to become a man? You can do it. Just say you're a man. No. That what we need is real, true sexual education. Let's see. So, hey, Jaleesa. Hey, Ari. Let's see. Yeah, I do NFP. I've been tracking my body for like 8 years now. When I ovulate from my left ovary, yes, you can even feel which ovary. Thank you, EA. I get a slight pain. I got an ultrasound done and I have small cysts in it, so that explains the pain. And exactly, and that's another thing. We can be aware of what's going on. There are so many. This is another reason too why masturbation is really important, because it's like the more that we have a tactile connection even with our bodies, and we're touching our bodies, we're touching our breasts, we can feel for changes. We can feel for changes down there, and we know what's going on. We don't just leave things up. Thank you, AI. That's exactly right. The more that you're natural fertility planning is not 100%, because the fact of the matter is that hormones will take over, and we'll just throw stuff out the window, and there's really no safety net. But it's still important, even if you're on birth control, even if you're on other methods. The number one form of birth control that I think is great is the copper plated IUD. Now, with that being said, that also doesn't come without risks. It is the number one most effective form of birth control on the planet. I mean, other than like permanent birth control, SNPs and things like that. But the problem with it is it can sometimes result in pelvic inflammatory disease and embed itself in the uterine lining. Then there's other hormonal things, but that has issues with blood clots and whatnot. So again, it's hard, and it's sad that the onus of birth control is solely on the shoulders of women, because this stuff is not without consequence. Let's see. Okay, Ella, I think the reason they tell you about these disabilities is so you can decide what to do, and if it's not incompatible with life, how to handle it. Some don't have kids they can't care for it. And it's not a small thing. People act as if it's like, oh, you're so horrible if you use eugenics, if you want to pick and choose what type of children you want to have. Listen, I have 4 extremely healthy, intelligent children, and it is very difficult. If I had a special needs child, I don't know that I could give them and my children all the quality of life that they deserve, and the fact of the matter is it is what it is. And a lot of these kids unfortunately would pass naturally. The fact of the matter is we now have this like hardcore high-tech medical technology that's not natural. That's not, if we're talking about like God's will, I don't know that God's will is for us to exert any and all hardcore medical technology to overturn what would have happened naturally. Ari said, yeah, because the world doesn't revolve around our individual suffering. Brittany is a hero. Protect this one. Oh, thank you. I love you. Ari, you're like amazing. She's like one of the first people who I like turfed up with, and I really appreciate your support. And I love all your takes, and I love when you challenge me. I love when you have like slightly different takes than I do. You like really keep me on my toes and keep me thinking about things, and I appreciate you a lot. All right, so let me, before I get too far, it's 1:09. All right, so let's, again, talking about the Philippines and what happens. Oh, I never finished my story. So the grand multiparous woman, the woman who was like 41 or something like that, who had 12 babies, she was on her 13th. Her husband died during the pregnancy, and she was having the worst uterine prolapse I'd ever seen in my life. Her uterus was falling out through her vagina. Okay, incontinence is a massive problem. Uterine prolapse, anal prolapse, where women's, I can't tell you what it does. It wrecks women who are on, really unhealthy. We see it a lot with women who are on like high rice diets, which is common in the Philippines, really high carb, low nutrient dense diets. And it's so sad because the Philippines is such a ecologically diverse country, and technically women should have access to so many nutrient dense foods that are native to the Philippines. But it's like, all the supermarkets took over, and all of the sort of like Western, supply chain big food took over, and women are eating garbage now, and it's showing up in how they birth. Their tissues are not as healthy. You know, they're not able to sustain this many births. She's having uterine prolapse. She's going to have issues for the rest of her life probably. And women are not given the surgeries that they need to fix uterine and pelvic floor issues. You know, it's serious. I mean, women are going to just be living with these embarrassing disabilities where you're literally like defecating on yourself. You know, I've gone through stuff like that, you know, and I really had to do a lot to tighten and to fix my pelvic floor. But there's times where you literally like shit yourself, you know, or a little bit, or even like pee yourself when you laugh. And that's what, because our pelvic floor has a bunch of muscles that hold everything together. And over time with childbirth, and especially if you're not eating like a healthy nutrient dense diet, those things start to fall apart. And I've talked about the fact that I had a abdominoplasty to fix my diastasis recti, which was very severe. You know, and I only had 4 children. Think about women who had, you know, 10, 11 children. Your abdominal wall, listen, your abdominal wall is, it's like, it meets in the middle, and there's like a, you know, it like connects sort of through like a membrane stuff here, but it meets in the middle, but it gets pulled apart and it's supposed to come back together. It's supposed to come back together, but if you're having pregnancy after pregnancy, it doesn't always. So a lot of women's abdomens will heal like this. So this abdominal wall will end here, and this abdominal wall will end here. And you'll feel there'll be a space, okay? And what happens is, I can't tell you that not having core strength, the strain on your lower back, it's for some women it's crippling, and I felt it. I had that issue. It was absolutely a quality of life issue. It's never covered. It's considered a purely cosmetic procedure in the U.S., and plastic surgeons have been fighting that for years, because the fact of the matter, it is a quality of life issue. For some women, it's so debilitating, it's literally disabling. And I know for myself, I was always an active person. I was always a really athletic person. My range of motion, my range of athletic ability, my range of just even keeping up with my kids was severely hindered, severely. And I paid for it out of pocket, and it's just sad. It's like we force mothers to go through all of this stuff, and their bodies wind up mutilated. And it's like, oh, well, wow, that's just a cosmetic procedure. Oh, you just want to tighten up your tummy. And I was like, it's crazy. We force women to go through stuff, and we don't take care of them. We just send them off with a baby. We're like, all right, go fucking figure it out. All right, so let's take a look at this. Okay. I have to pee, you guys, so I might like put this on for a second, and then I'm gonna run and pee. All right, here we go. All right, so this is from Vice News that I have like a mixed relationship with, to be totally honest. I like some Vice stuff, and I hate a lot of other. It sort of depends on like what the topic is. And who's reporting. Pretty much like anything else. All right.
Ako si MM, 19 years old. Bali, 20 years old na ako dito sa family mo.
Hold on. Okay, here we go.
And this is your first pregnancy? And this is your second pregnancy? Yung pinagbuntis ko siya, 17, bali 18 na ako nanganak sa kanya. Pagkabata talaga, delikado pag nauwi sa pagbubuntis.
Do you talk to boys about contraceptives and maybe sex? Never? No, why not? Was it a big surprise?
So basically this one girl is 16 years old, and she's on her first pregnancy, and the other one is 19, is on her second pregnancy. And they're saying, do you talk to boys about contraceptions? And it's like, no, I'm shy. And again, Philippines has a really interesting history because, again, it was originally a Spanish colony. Then it was an American colony, and then it was a Chinese colony. I'm not sure when was when. I think it was most recently an American colony. So it's such an intersection of so many different values. And so one thing about Spain is that, Spain is what really brought like the hardcore Catholic tradition to it. And, and it's like Filipinas especially, there's really heavy gender roles. Men are supposed to be, macho, and women are, again, it's supposed to be very sexually submissive. And even if you look at the language, the etymology so Tagalog is it's Tagalog and English are the two major languages, are the two official languages in the Philippines. And in Tagalog, the term for the sort of informal term for having sex, like if a man says, oh, I had sex, or a woman says, I had sex with my husband, it translates to using. And so when women say it, they say, he used me. And when a man say it, I said, I used my wife. That alone, this is why looking at language and this is why, linguistics is important, and it's, interesting, and it's important is because we can learn a lot about the cultural attitudes of a society, of a culture, by breaking down the etymology of the language. And again, when we talk about sex, it's something that's being done by one to another. It's what's being done by men to women. And he's using me, I have to be used. There's also in law, married women don't have a right to turn their husbands down. So, and because it's a Catholic country for many years, not only was abortion outlawed, but contraception was outlawed. And if women are starting to become pregnant at the age of 16, 17, when I was at the birth center, the youngest girl, I won't even call her a woman, the youngest girl who gave birth at the birth center was 13 years old. And I watched this little 13-year-old giving birth. It was stunning. It was right outside. We have a playground on the side, usually so that when women bring their families for a lot of the birth and childbirth education classes, we built a playground so that the kids could go outside and play while the women were, doing because a lot of women have to travel from far and they don't have backup childcare and stuff like that. So outside the window, you could see all of these kids playing outside. And then you saw this little girl. And again, Filipino women especially are very small stature. The babies are really small. A 6-pound baby is a totally average, normal size and weight. 5-pound baby is totally normal. For a larger person or somebody from a ethnicity where people are mostly bigger, a 5-pound baby would be concerning. A 6-pound baby would be a little concerning also. But for Filipino women, an 8-pound baby is massive. So these girls already look tiny. So watching this little girl give birth was literally like watching a child giving birth. And it wasn't like watching a child, it was watching a child give birth. And when we asked sort of what the situation was during her prenatal visits, the story is that the father was a local drug dealer who was 23 years old. She was 13. And that wasn't considered rape. She ended up surrendering the baby to the orphanage next door and came back every day to breastfeed the baby. And just seeing, again, this little girl's life still is going to be impacted forever. Giving birth changes the shape of our brain. It changes our bodies. And you have to understand there is a process of bonding that happens throughout the entire pregnancy, not just at birth, but then especially during a natural birth. and then through continued breastfeeding, this child now is going to have a deep mother wound, a loss. And this baby now is toiling in an orphanage, cared for to the best of the ability by the orphanage workers. But you got to understand, it's not like, oh, it's selfish, just give the baby up for adoption. That still has incredible emotional, psychological burden on the mother. And again, we talk about postpartum disorders. Postpartum disorders are chemical imbalances that are caused by a pregnancy. So, if you have a young woman with psychiatric disorder to begin with, and you force them through a pregnancy, you could be endangering not just her, you could be endangering her other child if she becomes psychotic. You don't understand what forcing a woman through pregnancy, what the implications of that could do. More than 5 kids is crazy, I think. It's not crazy. It's total. Listen, people who can support children, there are a lot of families who are well nestled into extended family units and who have big families, and and the kids do great with having lots of siblings. There's a lot of benefits to having lots of siblings if it's done well. Children learn, responsibility with each other, and then they have a network for the rest of their life. My best friend is one of 4 kids, and her brothers are to this day, all as adults, have remained such critical pieces of each other's lives. They've always been a support network for each other. So, it can be a wonderful thing, but it can be a horrific thing when parents aren't psychologically equipped, when they're not materialistically equipped. And again, this is, on a larger conversation, the issue of the nuclearization of the family. It is insane to think that one mother and one father, and the father's sole responsibility is to provide, and the mother's sole responsibility is to take care of the kids in the house, and everything else is a reasonable setup. It's not. It's not. We have ripped women away from the protective fabric of extended families, of their mothers, their sisters, their aunts, their cousins. We have isolated them in a home with a man and a family to look after, and in an unbelievable burden of responsibility that is not intended for one person. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for everyone involved. Lucid dreams, sacrifice upon sacrifice. When will it ever be enough? Lisa Fenwick, women aren't animals. We should never be forced through a pregnancy. Exactly. Elusive vulture, like language is very important. Yeah, it is important. Oh yeah, and speaking of likes, if you guys could like the video, that would be very helpful. I feel like I'm getting shadow banned to a certain extent. I was locked up. Jamie Kate Chaos. Hold on for 1 second, guys. Hey, sorry. All right. So I still think that more than 5 is crazy. They need care and attention and so much more. Very few people could give them all of that. That's not accurate, but that's okay. All right. Again, it all depends on the sort of, connection of the family. The reason why, and I have 4 kids, the reason why I've always been able to successfully manage my children, and even as a single mother, is that my sister is my neighbor who lives, literally like across the main street from me, within walking distance to my house. She owns her own house. She's got 3 kids, her and her husband. And, my sister is a lawyer, and she's also like a high value real estate agent. And our kids take the bus together. They go to school together. They're all virtually the same age. They've tremendously benefited from having a big network of cousins. And I've always had my sister. My sister's always had me. Down the street 5 minutes is both of my parents, who are still married and together, who have their own house. And then 10 minutes down the road on the opposite direction is my brother, who is married and has a child. So, when you do have, and I live in a community that's very, a lot of intact families. It's very family oriented. We have a really good school system. So, when you have a community, there's a lot of moms groups. The dads are very involved in our community. The fathers coach and they mentor, and they work together and they build baseball fields, and there's just a lot. It's very family centered. So when you live in a community that's really centered around families, where you have a lot of intact families, you have a lot of resources, you have the men are very involved, and you have an extended family unit, it's a lot different. Now, on the other hand, when you have to force that onto women who don't have those resources is cruel and horrific. There's a reason I moved back to this area. I used to live in Jersey City. That was where I bought my first condo. My husband was working in Midtown Manhattan and was going back and forth from Wall Street. He worked in the finance district. We had a lot of money. He made a lot of money early on, but money didn't cut it. Because I was able to get a nanny, and we love her, and she was still to this day, I consider her a part of my family. I've loved her. I've supported her through her births. But nothing will replace family in terms of supporting children. It's just, money isn't going to cut it. And then there just becomes like a disconnect if you're hiring help and stuff like that. What really helps is to live in these, extended family units, and not every woman has that. In fact, most women don't have that anymore. We've totally decimated the extended family. A lot of communities are not family centric. A lot of communities are not mother centric. A lot of communities, there's communities that, are almost exclusively mother led, and fathers are not participant. So again, I could talk about my experiences. That's because I've been blessed with a lot of resources and a lot of support, both intra-family and externally. To force women in that situation where you're just alone in a house and it's on you, figure it out. I can't even imagine. So, it's to say, again, we've got to be careful about viewing the world through a lens of our own experiences, because people come from vastly different backgrounds. I know how much work it is to raise 4 kids. I never want to force this onto any young mother who lived in a impoverished community, or lived away from extended family, and who didn't have the family resources that I have. Okay. Let's see. So anyway, these girls are talking about they're so young, and they talk about they don't feel comfortable talking to their boyfriends or talking to boys about pregnancy or contraception. And it should just one thing I want to teach my girls is that no person should ever have access to enter your body who you don't feel comfortable enough to talk to them about STDs or pregnancy or abortion. If you're not comfortable even having these conversations, they have no business inside of your body. They have no business, because again, once they've entered your body, the single most impactful decision of any woman's life, and I don't give a fuck what, it's not where they go to school, it's not where they choose to live, it's not what major they choose, it's not what career they choose. The single most impactful decision a woman will ever make for the rest of her life is whether or not to have children, and then when and with whom to have them with. It will change everything, and it will change it magnificently. if women or girls don't feel comfortable having these conversations, they need to understand that that person doesn't have the right to put them in a position to have their life change permanently and forever and for the rest of their lives and for any and all time, and will permanently alter their entire family lineage, their daughters' lives, their granddaughters' lives. Don't ever let somebody have that much power or control over your body. Oh, whoops. Sorry, okay. All right. Let's see.
Surprised when you found out you were pregnant?
Sobra. Sobrang gulat. Hindi ko kasi in-expect talaga yung news. Kasi mga bata pa ako, wala pa akong alam ng mag-alaga. Baka pinagbalakan ko ang
Again, so you can only imagine where, black market abortions and whatnot are, theoretically accessible, but the father didn't want to, right? The father gets ultimate say, and again, it's so often too that these men, and especially if they're not married, and these men can take off and have nothing to do with it. These men will sit there and pressure you. Oh, I want you to, and I've seen this. I've supported women who've been through this. I've literally seen girls who will get pregnant with a guy. I had a 17-year-old Dominican girl who got pregnant and was not sure what she wanted to do. And the boyfriend was like, he was like 20 or something. And she was like, I think 16 or 17. He was like 20 or 21. And he was like, no, I want you to keep it. I'll be there for you. I love you. We'll do this together. Please don't abort it. Da, 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 da. And she, took that to heart. And her mother wasn't really involved, and her father was elderly. And so he was, seemed like he was great. He came to a lot of the prenatal appointments and stuff, and he was involved in everything. And, I kept in touch with her, and over the next year they had broken up. He really had very little to no contact with them, and he had moved on with some other girl whose life is now forever and all time altered. It's not his, it's hers. It's not his. And that happens all the time. These guys will sit there and they will guilt trip women, guilt trip girls into keeping things and promise them everything. And again, you've got to understand, for a woman to decide to abort her child goes against every inborn instinct, especially once the pregnancy has progressed. As the pregnancy progresses and the mom starts to the woman starts to really feel the pregnancy and connect with it emotionally and things like that, we start to kick in instincts that is to defend and protect our children, our offspring, at all costs. But earlier, our primary instinct is to defend and protect our reproduction at all costs. So there becomes this crossover from when it becomes protecting our right to be sovereign over our bodies, be sovereign over our reproduction, and then it turns into now the greatest instinct and drive is to protect our progeny and our offspring. That's why we also have to protect women from waiting too long too. Because the longer a woman waits in a pregnancy, the more the birth hormones start to kick in, the more she starts to bond with that pregnancy, the harder it's going to be for her to let it go, and the more traumatic it's going to be. So a lot of women will sit and they'll flounder and they'll wait, not even realizing they're setting themselves up for a lot more chemical heartbreak than had they done it early on before those hormones start to kick in. Okay, let's see.
Jinky's situation is fast becoming the norm, with 1 in 10 young Filipino women, aged 15 to 19, already a mother or pregnant with their first child. I headed to a neighbouring district to meet with a group of boys to talk about their views on sex.
All right, so let's see. I wanted to fast forward. Of course, the boys, it's they're she was like, oh, what are your thoughts on sex? They're like, yeah, listen, and that's why I'm gonna be so firm to my girls on this. If a guy sits there and gets all like giggly, like, I don't know, when you ask him questions about like whether or not he wants to be a father and how he's going to take care of a baby. And also, it's like, let's ask these boys. They always assume these boys have no problem, pressuring girls into keeping it because they know they have an exit. They know that they can just leave. We need to start telling boys, well, what if I drop that baby off on your doorstep and I take off? They should have to answer from that standpoint. And I encourage women to start doing that too. Start dumping babies onto their doorstep and take off and live your best life and fuck the world, I mean, that's sad too, but they should have to learn what it feels like. Let's see, 420, I wrote down these,
And she was having doubts about going through with the pregnancy. How would that make you feel?
Wait, hold on.
Any of you worried that you might get your girlfriend pregnant?
Kung wala naman po talagang magamit, ay na, hindi na magagamit.
If one of you got your girlfriend pregnant and she was having doubts about going through with the pregnancy, how would that make you feel?
Pipigilan po namin palaglagang kasi ginawa namin, ginaginisip po namin yun. Parang pinagtaguan na rin po namin.
You hear them laughing? It's so fucking infuriating.
And does that situation...
Okay, so now all of a sudden they're good Catholics. Now all of a sudden it would be a sin to abort it. Well, you know what Catholicism also says? That extramarital sex is a sin. That abandoning your child is a sin. Right? Catholicism also says fornication is a sin. Shouldn't be fucking. But no. Well, that we can be flexible on. That we can be flexible on. That's all good. What's not all good is suddenly now she wants to have an abortion. Well, no, that just, that goes against our religious sensibilities. Pay attention. And you hear them laughing because they all know it's bullshit. He goes, we worked hard to make it. They all know. They all know. They don't give a fuck because they can just, peace out. They're not the ones going through it. And again, we talk about like, oh, well, women can just give babies up as if 9 months of your life aren't, taken out of your life. 9 months, and not even just 9 months, and then healing from it. It's really like having a baby, getting from conception to really like healing from childbirth takes about like 2.5 years. Your body takes about 2.5 years from birth. So that's really like a 3.5 year process that having a baby really takes out of a woman, right? As if that's not already going to have massive consequences, to her life, her ability to support herself, her other children. We got to also, I think everybody too, when they think about abortion, they always assume that abortion is like for first time women who like aren't mothers and are nervous about being mothers for the first time. That's not the case. Again, there's a lot of women who I'd support, and a lot of women I know who have had abortions already had children. They already had young children. I've had women who got pregnant by their 6-week checkup after giving birth, who had a newborn at home. Again, because men can't wait, right? So, and who were like, oh my God, who were basically pro-life, but they're like, I can't care for this other child. How am I going to care for both these babies? They had to prioritize the life of their existing child. Forcing people just to have babies just to have, other children living in abject poverty, and also increases the risk of abuse and violence. That's how we want kids raised. Irish twins are 10 months apart, no time for healing. Well, Irish twins is anything under 12 months, I thought. I could be wrong, but I thought it was Irish twins was anything under a full year. Let's see. I love you and your content, but I have to stand my ground here. Re-education over mockery. Appeal to reason and logic. Area, I totally hear that, but I really don't help to mock. Mocking what? Hold on. Oh, that boys shouldn't be mocked? I mean, yeah, I think that, no, I think that they should be kind of called out on it. I think, because the thing is, the reason why it's not just mocking them, and the reason why I'm calling it out, is because they're clearly showing that they don't value. Again, you got to understand, this is a very, like, macho society, like, high gender role society. Like I said, the term for having sex is using. It's men use women. It's, you'll just carry my child regardless, and I decide when we have sex. Men decide when to have sex. A married woman cannot say no to her husband. He's allowed to rape her over and over again, and she has no legal nothing. Nothing she can do. So yeah, no, the attitudes, I think, absolutely should be mocked. I think we should be mocking the fact that these girls who are already living in abject poverty, that they're threatened. These men, you have to understand, these young men are threatening these girls' lives. These are young girls, knowing that pregnancy in a country like the Philippines that does not have the maternity care that we have in the U.S. is literally threatening the life of that girl. And it's all a game and a joke. And they don't want to use contraception because it doesn't feel as good. They have access to condoms. They don't want to use it because it doesn't feel as good, and it's a joke. And, well, if she gets pregnant, well, she's going to keep it. No, I think that absolutely should be called out. Let's see, who gives a fuck what they think? They fucking hate us, and this law shows that. Yeah, this law shows. And the fact that, and let's be clear, this law, women cannot abort a baby even if their life is threatened. So this isn't a pro-life law. Let's be all the way clear. In the Philippines, if a pregnancy is guaranteed to take the life of the mother, she must continue with the pregnancy. They are absolutely okay with sacrificing the life of women to protect the child. And why is that? Because in a patriarchy, the lineage of the father is what takes precedence. The reason why the baby matters is because it is the father's baby. It is because that baby belongs to a man. And if we have to choose between that man's baby and the life of the woman carrying it, we're choosing the baby. Because again, that's the lineage of the father. That's his, honor. That's, you understand, that is an absolutely anti-woman, patriarchal. That is not pro-life. That is not a pro-life. That is an anti-life. That is a dehumanization of the mother. The mother is a chattel slave. She is an animal. She is a farm animal available for breeding. And again, the way that women are socialized in the Philippines, and I've noticed this when I was there, they're so polite. Women are socialized to be so super polite, so deferential. Be seen and not heard. They're not going to speak up. If a man doesn't want to use a condom, I can tell you, based off of the sort of personalities and the way that women are socialized in the Philippines, they're not using a condom. And that's just what's going to happen. And that is the message sent over and over. When a man wants to reproduce, he is going to reproduce. And all of the natural gatekeeping that women have always naturally been able to exercise over themselves, every animal in the animal kingdom virtually, all the majority of female mammals even have a right to gatekeep. Why do you think all the men have to, prance around and do special songs and perform and show plumage and offer the woman things? Because the woman has the right to gatekeep. The female in the species has the right to gatekeep and choose, okay? You have proven yourself. You are worthy of procreating with. I want to procreate, and I've chosen you over that other weaker male. That's why they fight each other, to show, I'm the stronger one. I can protect you. A society like this is saying a man doesn't have to offer you anything. He doesn't even have to stay with you during the pregnancy. He doesn't even have to take care of you, protect you, be there for you, be there for the baby. Once he's impregnated you, because he chose you to impregnate and whoever else, you must now dedicate your life, risk your life to raising that baby. Point blank, period. That's it and that's all. You're going to shut up and put up. You're going to shut up and put up. And he gets to choose which of all those babies that he's having he wants to have. Do you understand? This country, this island country, swelled from 45 million to over 100 million in a very short time. Yeah, absolutely. Women have the right to gatekeep. Absolutely. It is our birthright. The right to choose which men get to have children, which men will reproduce in a society is the birthright of the female class. Period. All right. Let's take a look at...
Happen a lot.
Just by talking to Filipino teens, it was obvious there was a lack of conversation around safe sex. Unsurprising in a country that's over 80% devout Catholic.
Zeke, stop it. The cat is clawing on my wall, and it's like making a horrible sound. Shit, I gotta go in a couple minutes. I just want to show this one is... Alright, I'm gonna skip... Alright, we're gonna show this last thing just as like a final...
They're treating people, making them stupid, so that they just follow the rules and then just pay taxes and don't complain.
It's the few Catholics, I would like to use the term fundamentalist Catholics and Catholic groups. They are the ones really not in touch with the rest of the people. We have been called names. We have been shamed and humiliated. We were called abortionists by the opposition.
And that's a kind of odd thing about the law around abortion. It's always the life of the baby that's put forward.
That's the norm here. There is no reason that would allow abortion. So whether rape or incest. So a doctor, the woman herself, any accessory to the crime can be imprisoned. There are doctors here that actually find abortion, even life-saving abortion, unspeakable. They would rather have women die from pregnancy and childbirth. Yes.
So tell me...
Contacted...
So tell me how that's pro-life. Tell me how that's a pro-life policy. When we're willing to sacrifice women. That is a patriarchal policy. That is a policy that says the lineage of the father reigns supreme. Doesn't matter if the woman is going to have pelvic prolapse. It doesn't matter if her literal uterus is going to fall out. Doesn't matter if she's going to bleed to death because she is so nutrient deficit. She is so malnourished because she lives on a diet of white rice and has no nutrient density, that her hemoglobin is so fucked. It doesn't matter. He has the right to reproduce when and where he wants to, and he doesn't have to do anything to earn it. He doesn't even have to take care of it. And women will put up and shut up. They are there as vehicles. Tell me how that is pro-life. Tell me how that is Catholic. Tell me how the fuck that is Christian. If there are any Christians in the house, I would love to know. How in the fuck is that a pro-life position? You will watch a woman bleed to death, and you will rip the baby out of her uterus, throw her away, and be like, oh, well, at least we got a baby. And if the man isn't there to show up, then we'll throw it all over into an orphanage. And the baby will half the time these babies aren't even surviving to the age of 5. How the fuck is that a pro-life position? A lot of these babies are dying. It takes like 2.5 years for kids to be adopted out, and virtually all of the adoptions, only 2% of the adoptions are intra nationally. They are the vast majority is 98% are internationally. Intranationally, only 2%. So only 2% of Filipinos are adopting Philippine children, because the vast majority of those children were conceived by rape or incest, sexual abuse. And those kids now are seen as like not as good. How the fuck is that a pro-life position? I really want to know. Doctors in the Philippines say that on average, and this is, you won't find these stats anywhere, but they estimate that 10 women and girls a day are dying from illegal abortions. How is that a pro-life position? 10 women and girls a day. When we stop respecting the sanctity of life on both ends, when we're just having abortions and having, recreational sex and aborting babies at 20 weeks, aborting babies at 15, 16 weeks when we've known about it, that's no respect for life. But when we're throwing women away and we're forcing them to throw themselves away and harm the existing children that they have in the house and stretch already non-existent resources, that is not respecting life. Life should be at the core of this entire conversation. I am pro-life. When we look at the only way to be pro-life is to carry any and every embryo, any and every fetus, that's not a pro-life position. When women are at risk of death, that is not a pro-life position. I gotta go. So with that being said, and they really fucking nailed it on this timing, I've got to go to a Mother's Day event with my kids, and I'm really looking forward to that. So one thing I want to say is I might be linking up with some local midwives to develop a curriculum for menstrual extraction. And this was actually an idea that was brought to me by somebody named Copia Webster, who comments, who's awesome. And one beautiful thing about living in Pennsylvania is that we have a lot of Amish and Mennonite communities. And as we know, Amish and Mennonite communities don't go to the hospital virtually ever. They do occasionally, but they do pretty much everything out of the hospital, and they birth out of the hospital at home. So, and they have a very high birth rate. And so I happen to know quite a few Amish midwives, and I've trained with some of them. They've trained the midwives who have trained me. There's a lot of intercommunication. We work a lot with them. I've had colleagues who have gone in and done Amish births themselves. And the beautiful thing about that is that they have a lot of low-tech knowledge and wisdom that we've lost to obstetrics, and to the technocratic model of obstetrics. So with that being said, we are going to look at maybe developing a protocol for creating a curriculum to teach menstrual extraction, which would empower women and girls with the knowledge of how to basically perform an early abortion on themselves. It is doable, and the evidence says that it is safe and effective. So I will get more into that. Also, just remember on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, please be there, May 10th at 1 p.m. I'm hosting another call-in show, just like the Gen Spect one that we had before. I'm going to have two options. I'm going to have a call-in number, and I'm going to have Zoom. Before, the call-in number was kind of fucked because I was doing it through my phone and people couldn't really hear. But I'm going to try to have it coming through have the phone line, because I use a Google Voice, have it come through my computer. So if you want to stay anonymous, or you don't have Zoom, or you're only on your phone, you can call in. The line will be active only during the stream. Don't harass me, you guys. I'm turning off the line. Don't load up my inbox with stupid messages. And I'm going to have a Zoom link that will also be available. I want all perspectives. All perspectives are welcome. I want to hear pro-life perspectives. I want to hear pro-choice perspectives. I want to hear pro-regulation perspectives. I want to hear from heterosexual women, homosexual women. I want to hear from bisexual women. I want to hear from older women, younger women, women who have had abortions, women who haven't had abortions. I want to hear from women who are mothers, women who are child-free, women who are child-rich, women who've had abortions that they regret, women who've had abortions that they're grateful for. I want to hear from a range of positions. I'm going to just really stay neutral and just host it as I'm just the facilitator. And not give like a lot of my input. I want us to be respectful of each other, and comments are going to be limited to 10 minutes. If you want to reserve a spot, send me an email at aslightlytwistedfemale. Anybody who reserves a spot is going to be the first to get the links. So they'll be the first in line. Basically on Zoom, you like line up. There's people who will like wait to get in, and I'll approve you when it's your turn. If you want to reserve a spot, email me at aslightlytwistedfemale@gmail.com, and I will make sure that you get the link before everybody else does. And then after we go through that, then I'll open it up to the public, and the links will be made available in the chat. It's going to be limited to, I kind of let people rock last time and it got really long, and I think that there was a lot of people who didn't get a chance to speak, so I'm going to be strict with the 10-minute cutoff. So I'm just going to cut you off, unfortunately, if it goes long. I'll give you like a warning, and then it's got to get cut off. Because I want as many people as possible to be able to speak. So try to think about what you want to say. And yeah, I want, let's get into the nuance of this conversation. Let's break through some of the sound bites, and let's see what's, you know, what we can accomplish together. The one beautiful thing about this whole Troon issue is that it has brought together women from both sides of the aisle and, you know, political spectrum. And let's take advantage of that. Now that we have each other's company and now that we have each other's attention, let's try to help each other see both perspectives. All it can do is evolve us. Listening to the other side can either strengthen your position or it will force you to evolve your position. Either way, it's a good thing. Okay? Standing in an echo chamber with your fingers in your ears doesn't help you grow. Like I said, my position is that abortion is always a tragedy and that we must protect. I would give my life to protect women's right to access it. Because what's even worse of a tragedy is the dystopia that happens when we outlaw it. You know, I always, the life of the mother will always come first, but the life of the baby is not irrelevant. So, you know, I do prioritize the life of the mother because the mother is the glue that holds families together. The woman is here, you know, and then, you know, when possible, you know, let's try to, it's also sad when women are forced into abortions because of situations and they don't want an abortion, but you know, they don't, in a capitalist society, it's like they don't have enough support or emotional support or family support. Let's try to come back to like midwifery communities and create villages of mothers who can support women who do want to keep their babies and who just don't feel like they have the support, you know. If we're going to go in that direction, we can do this in a holistic way that doesn't require outlawing. We can give the options for women to continue with their pregnancies who maybe would have if they felt like they had the support. We can create that again. That's the right way. That is the right way to start to like lower rates of abortion. Comprehensive sexual education, not the genderbread man, not teaching about gender expression, but actually real stuff, teaching women how to be sovereign over their bodies, giving women the language to gatekeep, teaching men to respect women and understand what women have to go through. If boys saw what birth does to women and they had to watch childbirth, they might have a little more respect. They might realize what this is, you know, entails. And if men weren't so easily off the hook, they also might have a little bit more respect for this process. So, all right, guys. Sabine, thank you. Ari, thank you. Aria, LL, Jaleesa, Mesh, and Jaleesa. Listen, I'm so fine with being challenged. You know, I respect where you're coming from. You know, I still think that they needed to be called out a little bit. But anyway, I love you guys. I appreciate you. I learned so much from you guys. So I hope to see you on Tuesday. Please, please, please come. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. The more people who are there and the more perspectives that we have, the better and the more successful this will be. So this is your opportunity. Like I said, either the Zoom and you can show your face, or you can leave the camera off. You can be totally public or be totally anonymous, or you can show your face and just not say who you are. Whatever. Okay. So don't worry. There's ways to stay anonymous. And there's also, if you want just an opportunity to just use the platform, I want this to be all of our platform. I gotta go. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Hopefully I'll be back on before then, but if I don't, happy Mother's Day. I love you guys. You're the best. Please like the video if you haven't. Please support the channel. Donations are always wonderful and helpful so I can keep making work, and I love you guys. All right, bye. Love you. Oh wait, let's see, stop.